Week 5 is here, and it is the absolute wild, wild west for the running back position. Today, I'm breaking down my top 36 running back rankings in tier list format. We're going to go over injuries. We're going to go over bye weeks. There's a lot of disgusting names inside my top 24, top 30 running backs this week. Should be a lot of fun to break down. Let's start with the bye weeks because we do have a number of teams on bye. Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, and Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears are not expected to play this week because their teams are on bye, which means you will have to do without those players. If that doesn't make matters worse, we also have a number of injuries that we need to talk about. Let's start with Jonathan Taylor, who was officially ruled out with the ankle injury he suffered last week. There's a very good chance he'll probably be out next week as well, given what a lot of the fantasy docs have said. This is typically a 1, 2, maybe 3 week injury, so you will have to do without Jonathan Taylor this week. Trey Sermon, of course, was a big waiver addition as a result. Joe Mixon also officially listed out for week 5. It looks like we're going to get another Cam Akers, Dario Goombawale, JJ Taylor backfield in Houston against the Buffalo Bills. Devin Singletary not officially ruled out yet, but he is listed as doubtful for week 5. So rookie Tyrone Tracy and second-year running back Eric Gray are likely the two lead backs. We haven't gotten really any indication on the split, although one Giants beat reporter said big steps ahead, big opportunity ahead for the rookie Tyrone Tracy. I would expect him to lead this backfield. Brian Robinson is the only true kind of like game time decision. He projects, maybe a little bit 80%, 90% of what he usually is, given that he is coming into the game with a pretty significant injury. He missed practice Wednesday, missed practice on Thursday, did practice in a limited fashion on Friday, and then he actually tweeted this out yesterday, like a thumbs up. Looks like he's going to try and play given this tweet. Looks like he's going to try and give it a go. Austin Eckler would see a little bit of an upgrade in this situation. Brian Robinson a little bit of a downgrade just because he's probably limited to some degree. Zamir White, groin listed out for week 5, which means Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah, and whoever else will be the lead backs there in the Las Vegas Raiders backfield. And then Jaylen Warren also won't play this week, dealing with the knee injury. It sounds like he's going to probably be out for the next couple of games, potentially, given the reporting that we've heard, but also an interesting thing to follow there. And then I just thought I would talk about Nick Chubb too, because he is listed as out this week, but likely will be activated either next week or in week 7. Now, I know the medical timelines say, oh, it's going to be a slow ramp up. Nick Chubb is probably not ready to be back on the field. He had a multi-ligament ACL tear, bunch of other nerd stuff. But to be honest, some human beings are just simply built different. And I do think that Nick Chubb, we just might have to bow down to an elite physical specimen here. If you guys were, interested in buying into Nick Chubb because you're 3-1 or you're 4-0 and you're looking for some late season upside, I think it is definitely within the range of outcomes. This guy is just completely built different and has a very, very productive season once he's back on the field. There'll probably be like a week or 2 ramp up period, but by like week 8, week 9, I really do think that this dude might be back to his full workload, and it's just business as usual for Nick Chubb. So definitely keep that in mind if you are one of those teams in a winning position. So getting into the elite running backs 1 to 12 in my rankings, not usually as elite as we're usually talking about here, because like I said, we're without 9 running backs that are fantasy football staples because of bye weeks and injuries. All of these top guys are definitely in your lineup, though. As far as who could overperform and who could underperform, we do have some of these elite running backs in very good matchups, including Kenneth Walker. Bijan Robinson, of course, played on Thursday night. Didn't really have that great of a game, but he was in a good matchup to set up there, and he locked into my rankings as RB6. Josh Jacobs versus the Los Angeles Rams also has a very, very solid matchup as well. Not a lot of great matchups up top for the top guys. Elite running backs that are in high-scoring games, however, we have Derrick Henry in a 50.5 point over-under game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Jordan Mason, high-scoring game there against the Cardinals. James Conner, conversely, in the same game against the 49ers. Josh Jacobs and Kyron Williams both in that Packers-Rams game. That was one of the staples that I talked about on Thursday's video where I broke down every matchup in every game. James Cook also 47.5 point over-under in that Houston Texans Buffalo Bills game, so he's also in a very good spot. Then we have some running backs who are in bad matchups. Breece Hall going up against that Vikings defense, going to be very, very challenging. Aaron Jones in his matchup against the Jets defense, same game, definitely also very challenging. Alvin Kamara against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football, not great. And then, like I said, James Cook against the Houston Texans. They've been pretty solid against the run, but it is a high-scoring game environment. So I do like to highlight a guy or two from this tier as well, just to kind of showcase some usage trends that we've been seeing. Kenneth Walker is my RB5 in my rankings right now. He has been outstanding when healthy this year. He is still a guy that I'd be willing to shop, not necessarily a sell high, but just a guy that I would use to potentially get up to Breece Hall, or some of these other guys that I just still view a touch ahead of Kenneth Walker, because he only had 12 carries on Monday Night Football. He had 17 opportunities, but he scored 3 touchdowns and 33 PPR points. And because he hasn't really been on the field too much this season, everybody has this very, very rosy view of Kenneth Walker. The backfield is still split here. Zach Charbonnet still played 41% of the snaps. He's still getting opportunities. He's still running routes. It is encouraging that Kenneth Walker is running more routes than we expected, and this is yet another smash spot for him with the New York Giants, and it's possible you can get even more for him if you wait one more week and you see Kenneth Walker have yet another big time performance. But I do think he is the type of guy that I would be looking to shop if he has another big game against the New York Giants. Alvin Kamara is my RB7. The reason I want to talk about him here is because his usage has actually spiked the last 2 weeks. Big game against Kansas City on Monday Night Football. The Saints, of course, needing to bounce back after that tough loss to Atlanta. Kansas City does rank first in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, though, so it is a brutal matchup, and we might actually see Kendre Miller make his season debut, or it's coming up very soon. So I'm interested to see how that affects the backfield, the carry share, and so on and so forth. Josh Jacobs, my RB10. I also wanted to highlight one of my favorite buy lows now that Jordan Love is back on the field. He has not been getting the workload or the fantasy production that we all maybe expected Josh Jacobs to get coming into the season, but he is still a very solid option. I still do think that he is going to be a workhorse on the ground as far as carries are concerned. I think he's going to be more efficient now that Jordan Love is back on the field, and that has been his primary issue so far this year, has been efficiency. His volume has been there. He just has not been punching in touchdowns. He has not been catching a lot of passes. He's not been really efficient on his touches, and I think that will change with Jordan Love back on the field this week. So now let's break down my high-end RB2s, and as we always do over here, we're going through my top 36 running backs, focusing primarily on that running back 13 to 36 area, because I feel like that's where most of the start-sit decisions come for you guys. My running back 13 on the week is Chuba Hubbard. It feels a little bit weird putting him this high on the list. I have a sneaky suspicion that the Andy Dalton-assance is probably going to end sometime soon, and it could end this week against a very good, stingy Bears pass defense. However, if this offense is performing yet again, and we've seen the Carolina Panthers look really good in 2 straight games, Chuba Hubbard has been a top 8 running back in both of those games so far, and the Chicago Bears are 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So it is a really good matchup for Chuba Hubbard, but I think the passing offense as a whole could struggle to move the ball, with Deontay Johnson having a tough matchup, Xavier Legette having a tough matchup, and of course Andy Dalton having a tough matchup as well. But Chuba Hubbard has to be in your lineup. It's a pretty good matchup for him. Running back 14 for me is Travis Etienne. Etienne missed a lot of last week's game with a shoulder issue, so I'm not reading too much into the 51% of snaps that he ended up having. This is a great spot for him to finally have a big game, finally have one of these games where we look at Travis Etienne a little bit differently, because right now he's been rather disappointing as far as the big performances. I do think he's worth sending some offers for. If you guys are in a winning position, maybe you're a little weak at running back, maybe you ran a hero RB out of your draft and you're rolling with like Rico Dowdle or something like that at your RB2 spot, maybe Devin Singletary, something like that. The Colts are 25th against fantasy running backs, and the Jags actually have league average or better matchups for running backs over the next 4 games. Each of their next 4 games are good matchups for Travis Etienne. So I do think, because of the Tank Bigsby situation, because of the fact that he was dealing with a shoulder injury that's kind of impacted his usage, and the bad matchups that he's had, I do think you can get a pretty solid discount on him. Although I will say his name has been floated in like trade talks. It's possible that Tank Bigsby works into this backfield a little bit more. So that is not a buy that doesn't come without risk. Running back 15 for me in my rankings is Brian Robinson. I talked about him in the injury section, but it does look like he will play in this game according to him, the thumbs up tweet. He's listed as a game time decision. Austin Eckler, low-key, has been very consistent, 10+ PPR points in every game that he's played. If Brian Robinson were to be a surprise inactive, Austin Eckler would slide right in here at RB15 for me. So if you're wondering, I have Eckler, Brian Robinson got ruled out after I've recorded this or something. I will say Austin Eckler would be in this spot, assuming Brian Robinson is out. Now Brian Robinson here, though, if he's playing, has a very good spot to have a good performance, because the Cleveland Browns not only are probably going to project as a good game script for Brian Robinson as a guy who runs the ball primarily, but they're also a lot weaker against the run than they are against the pass. So whoever starts for the Commanders in this game has a very good matchup. Running back 16 for me is DeAndre Swift. Welcome back to the NFL. He was completely lost in space for a couple of weeks there, but maybe this offensive line, maybe this offense, maybe DeAndre Swift himself figured it out a little bit, or maybe they just got lucky. In either case, Carolina is a free square for fantasy running backs. Their 3rd easiest matchup on the entire slate for DeAndre Swift. The workload is solid. The game environment's kind of meh at 41.5 point over under. The Bears are 3.5 point favorites, but I do like DeAndre Swift to have a pretty efficient day against a very, very suspect Carolina Panthers run defense. RB17 for me in my rankings is Najee Harris. Kind of a ho-hum game environment against the Cowboys on Sunday night, but Najee is completely alone in this backfield. There's no Jalen Warren. There's no Cordero Patterson. Both guys have already been ruled out. There's a human by the name of Aaron Shampkin in this backfield. I have no idea who the hell that is, but Najee Harris is probably going to get a big share of the touches. It wouldn't shock me if the Shampton character is actually more efficient than Najee because that's kind of his MO. But at the same time, the Cowboys are second to last against fantasy running backs. I think even a household sponge would run for 5 yards per carry against this defense. So Najee Harris, I like him to actually find the end zone over on Underdog Fantasy, and we're going to be building out a pick'em entry throughout this video if you guys want to tail it. Running back 18 for me is Trey Sermon. Sermon has the 5th easiest matchup of any running back on the slate. He has clearly been the number 2 running back behind Jonathan Taylor all season long. If you look at the workload, he's been playing a lot more of the snaps than Tyler Goodson or any other running back in this backfield. So yeah, I think Tyler Goodson will probably be involved to some degree, but I do think that 60-70% of the work is what we're looking at for Trey Sermon. This offense has no problem trusting one back when Jonathan Taylor is out. We saw that with Zach Moss last year, and I do think that Trey Sermon has a pretty good game in this one. To be honest, I hope that Anthony Richardson misses this game because I think Joe Flacco will help move the offense a little bit more, get some more red zone opportunities, but I do think Trey Sermon will be the trusted back if they get any goal-to-goes, if they get any red zone opportunities, and I like him to go higher his rushing plus receiving first downs because I also like his ability to catch the ball, and I like his ability in short yardage. So let's move into the next tier of running backs. We have the low-end RB2s for the week. Running back of the Cleveland Browns, Jerome Ford, is the first guy of this tier. The projection machines don't super love Jerome Ford this week, but 3 of 4 games, he has been a workhorse running back, over 70% of the team snaps, and this is pretty crucial. In this game, the Cleveland Browns going to the Commanders, it is a high-scoring game environment. Both left tackle Jedrick Wills of the Cleveland Browns and right tackle Jack Conklin of the Cleveland Browns haven't been on the field all season long. Both are listed as questionable. Both logged like limited practices twice this week. There's a very good chance that Jerome Ford's going to get some reinforcements back on his offensive line, and that should really, really help Deshaun Watson. That should really, really help Jerome Ford on the ground. So I actually do kind of like him as like a sneaky start this week. If you guys play DFS, I think he's a decent play. So definitely don't write off Jerome Ford this week. He's actually a decent play. Running back 20 for me is Zach Moss, who had a great workload coming into week 4, but Chase Brown really impacted that workload in week 4's game last week, and he had a monster day, scored 2 touchdowns, indicating that this Chase Brown, Zach Moss split might be a trend that continues. Zach Moss, of course, has been solid, but Brown is undoubtedly more explosive. The only reason I still feel pretty confident in Zach Moss this week is, number one, it's a very high-scoring game environment, the number 1 highest over-under on the slate against the Ravens. And Zach Moss, if the Ravens get ahead, is the guy who gets the long down and distance work. He gets the 2-minute drill stuff, and he gets most of the red zone touches sans last week. So the Ravens, 23rd against fantasy running backs in adjusted fantasy points allowed. So I really do like Zach Moss as a top 20 running back this week. Number 21 on my list here is Tyrone Tracy, Danny Dimes or Danny Checkdowns, whatever you want to call him, without Malik Neighbors on the field. I do think that both Wan'Dale Robinson and Tyrone Tracy are going to PPR scam their way into a lot of fantasy points. With Devin Singletary out for this game, I think Tyrone Tracy takes a majority of the work. I mean, Eric Gray will probably still be involved to some degree, but Tyrone Tracy was drafted in the mid-rounds of the NFL draft, has been rather efficient when he's been on the field. He has been way more involved when Singletary is off the field than Eric Gray has been. I doubt he'll be like a workhorse necessarily, but I do think that Tyrone Tracy's receiving upside is very interesting in this matchup where the Seahawks are 6-point favorites against the Giants, and the Giants don't have their best offensive player in Malik Neighbors to command all the targets that he commands. The Seahawks have been rather stingy against the running back position, but their front is still pretty banged up, so I like Tyrone Tracy to go higher than 9.65 fantasy points. He has the size to punch in any goal line opportunity. opportunities should he get them. So running back 22 for me is Alexander Mattison. Zamir White officially out for week 5. So this comes after Antonio Pierce earlier in the week was already saying that Mattison has earned more work. I do think that he is going to command a pretty large share of this backfield. The Broncos are kind of a tough nut to crack as far as a matchup is concerned, especially for a Raiders team that won't have Devontae Adams. Jacoby Myers is going to see Patrick Surtain in shadow coverage, and they don't have, I guess, one of their starting running backs in Zamir White. I don't think this is a great matchup for the Raiders just as a matchup versus offense-defense, but workhorse volume is workhorse volume. If Alexander Mattison goes out there and has 85% of the snaps, it wouldn't shock me one bit, so I really like him as a top 24 play this week as well. Running back 23 for me is Kareem Hunt. Encouraging usage in week 4. He took over the primary role in this Chiefs backfield after Carson Steele fumbled. The bad news for Kareem Hunt is what if Carson Steele is actually going to be a big part of this offense? He was just benched for the fumble last week, and everything will be back to like a 3-way timeshare in week 5. I do think that is definitely possible. Samaje Perine, of course, is still going to work in on long down and distance, 2-minute drill situations. He actually took the only inside the 5 carry away from Kareem Hunt and Carson Steele last week too. And the Saints are nails against fantasy running backs, ranking 5th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. I think everybody just really ready to throw Kareem Hunt into their lineup could be disappointed. I think there are better like streaming kind of options at the running back position this week. I kind of want to wait and see what this backfield looks like when Carson Steele doesn't fumble in the game. Is Kareem Hunt just going to come out here, have 50-60% of the snaps, or is it going to be a complete 3-way timeshare and we have no idea how to crack this backfield? So closing out this tier, we have running back 24 for me, Cam Akers. He has a lot going on this week, so he is kind of a back-end RB2 for this reason. No Joe Mixon, right? He's going to be the lead ball carrier. Hopefully a positive game script at home for the Texans offense against a Bills defense that gets wiped by every running back in the NFL. This is the stone easiest matchup on the entire slate for a fantasy running back. They are literally dead last, and Derrick Henry absolutely carved them up last week. However, Akers is just not that good. So I want to put him higher than this, but I can't really put him higher than RB24. I think he's a fine low-end flex play. Like I said, I would not go crazy firing him in there over better workloads because I do think Dario Gumbawale is going to be involved, and we even saw J.J. Taylor heavily involved in recent weeks. So Cam Akers probably a lock for like 15, maybe 18 carries if it's a good game script, but I don't think he's going to be heavily involved on third down, long down and distance, and things of that nature. So if the Bills get up early, that could spell doom for Cam Akers' workload. Getting into the flex plays here, we already saw one of these guys play. That was Rachaad White, 10.4 PPR points on Thursday Night Football. Running back 26 for me is Chase Brown. I talked about him already with Zach Moss. Great game last week, had 2 touchdowns. Breakout performance, really. Maybe this is a sign of things to come because I always thought coming into the year that Chase Brown was the guy that the offensive staff wanted to command this workload. And Zach Moss was just there as like a contingency plan. He has been a workhorse for weeks. The backfield, though, might be going towards more of a 50-50 split. Maybe even Chase Brown takes the lion's share of the touches if he continues to play at the level he's playing. Either way, Chase Brown is a great option if you guys have a lot of players on bye, have a lot of injuries for like a boomer bust spike week because he can break off long touchdowns. He is obviously very efficient in the red zone, and we know he can break off those long plays and catch the ball, like I said. So if you have bye weeks, if you have injuries, I think Chase Brown is a very fine low-end flex play. In a game environment that has a 50.5-point over-under, there should be a lot of points scored in that Bengals-Ravens game. Running back 27 for me is Javonte Williams. He had 10 points last week, and you'd think he absolutely struck gold because Javonte Williams, it's like pulling teeth to get fantasy points from this guy. An efficient string of carries, a couple, receptions. That is all he needs to look like he had a great game. The Raiders defense is 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. I am still worried to start Javonte Williams because he's not really that good. But it looks a little bit rosier now than it did before because the workload kind of returned to him in week 4. And also, like I said, he was a lot more efficient than he's been. I think Jaleel McLaughlin will still be involved. I guess I can just hope that Javonte Williams will finally break off some plays, maybe punch in a touchdown or whatever. I do like Javonte Williams to go higher than his 12.5 rushing attempts because at home for the Denver Broncos, I think they could win this game. I think they could control this game, and that spells a high rushing game script for Javonte. So running back 28 for me is Rico Dowdle. The Giants got hit with the Rico last week. He found the end zone, had a solid game. Ezekiel Elliott's workload has drastically declined in the last few weeks. Rico Dowdle would be so much better for fantasy if this Hunter Lepke character would just fuck off and let Rico Dowdle get all of the routes for the team. He is only getting like 30% of the routes right now, and I think we all know that Rico Dowdle would probably be the better receiving back for this team to deploy. So for now, until we see a workload change, Rico's kind of just like a 45% snap share dude, and that makes him in flex play consideration. He is definitely the best Dallas running back that you'd want to be starting. But as of now, we need to see him get up to 50, 60% of the snaps, 40, 50% of the route participation for him to be anything more than this. So it's a decent spot for him against the Steelers defense, but I need to see more from a workload standpoint. Running back 29 for me is Antonio Gibson. Ramondre Stevenson has been benched. According to Gerard Mayo, there was a report today that he called him and basically said that he won't be starting. He will be active. He'll get touches and things of that nature. But until he cleans up his fumbles, Antonio Gibson is going to be the starter. So a lot of people kind of speculated this offseason that Antonio Gibson could outright win this job. It's surprising now that Ramondre is, of course, the guy making all the money in this backfield, but I do think Antonio Gibson will get the lion's share of touches this week, and I do think he is a viable low-end flex play for those of you guys that are desperate with injuries and bye weeks. And of the two Patriots running backs, if I had both of them, I would start Antonio Gibson based on these recent comments, because this is now the second time this week that they've talked about Ramondre Stevenson not starting. Head coach Gerard Mayo on Wednesday also said that Gibson is definitely under consideration if Stevenson keeps fumbling, and now we're seeing that kind of play out today where basically Ramondre Stevenson was benched for Antonio Gibson. The matchup is good. It's going to be a close game. It's probably going to be low scoring. It is the lowest over-under on the slate between the Dolphins and the Patriots, but it could result in a lot of touches for the running backs. The Miami Dolphins are 25th against the run, and the Patriots are home favorites in this game. So Ramondre Stevenson is actually my RB30. Again, I would still feel semi-comfortable starting him, but I don't love the situation knowing that Antonio Gibson is probably going to get more touches in this game, or at the very least, it's going to be like a 50-50 split. If you want to roll the dice with Stevenson, it's up to you, but I would definitely start Antonio Gibson over him if you had both of those options. Getting into the deeper league flex plays, again, these guys are all just kind of, interesting low-end dart throws if you guys need them. We have Braylon Allen, I think, is in a pretty good spot. Austin Eckler also in a pretty good spot. If Brian Robinson plays, like I said, Austin Eckler has 10-plus PPR point performances, catching his usual checkdowns and so on and so forth. So even if Robinson is out there and he's getting 80, 90% of his full workload because he's close to 100%, I still think Austin Eckler's a half-decent play. Braylon Allen, again, terrible matchup for Breece Hall and for Braylon Allen, but the carry workload has increased every game in the last 3 weeks for Braylon Allen. As a Breece Hall manager, it would be nice if it would stop, but at the same time, Braylon Allen is getting the touches. Bucky Irving is in this tier. He already played on Thursday Night Football. Fumbled and cost us the game, but what are you going to do? It was a great play by Jesse Bates. Roschon Johnson, also an interesting play in this territory. Probably not the type of guy you want to be relying on, but the matchup is too easy for Swift, and DeAndre Swift is DeAndre Swift. There's a very good chance he could still lose this job even after a great performance in Week 4. Raheem Mostert is also maybe an interesting desperation flex. He is likely active for this game. Devon Achane has been somewhat inefficient on his new kind of higher touch and snap share workload, so maybe Raheem Mostert is the spark that this offense needs. This offense really needs anything to get them going, because as of right now, it is pretty much unwatchable. Zach Charbonnet, the final guy that I would talk about, is like a low-end flex here. Despite the monster game from Kenneth Walker on Monday Night Football, Charbonnet still had almost 11 PPR points and a 41% snap share. Not the worst low-end flex play that you could possibly fire out there. So that was my top 36 running backs. Hopefully I set your fantasy football lineups for you. Again, if I had somebody ranked RB21 and there's somebody ranked RB25 that you're deciding between, if I was setting your lineup, I would set the guy who was RB21. So definitely keep that in mind as you set your fantasy football lineups. As I mentioned throughout this video, we were building out an underdog pick'em entry. If you guys want to tail this entry, you can win up to 20x your money on this 5x entry. I threw in Breece Hall's first quarter receiving yards to give this one a little bit more juice. New customers over on Underdog can get this free square pick'em special and up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you use the promo code FSE when you sign up and make your first deposit. So definitely check that out if you're interested. You can tail this entry. You can play a lot of pick'em games. They have streaks. They have pick'em champions. In-season best ball resurrection drafts are going on right now. Ton of stuff going on over on Underdog Fantasy. And of course, when you sign up using code FSE and make your first deposit of at least $10, you will also get our weekly start sit rankings manifesto for free into your email inbox all season long to help you set your fantasy football lineups. You can get my start sit rankings at every single position, all the matchup charts that I use, all of the Vegas information that I use. So definitely, if that interests you, the link will be down below in the description to sign up on Underdog Fantasy. Use code FSE. And also, if you want to ask us us a question if you want to get your team reviewed. If you want to check out our rest of the season rankings, all of that stuff is available on flockfantasy.com. Promo code FSE over there for 30% off, 7 days for free, and 6 months for free, plus a free team review if you sign up for an annual package in the Mother Flocker tier. If that interests you, check that out. Link down below in the description. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you are new around here. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.